Welcome to StanCat. What it means to be well-educated. How do you tell if you've been well-educated? Do you wave a high school diploma? Or do you graduate from Stanford with a major in computer programming? Those things, for the most part, a high school diploma with your name on it, or a graduation from Stanford in computer programming, they don't tell me whether you've been well educated or not. At Stanford, you might have gotten a swell technical education. You can fix it, you can run it, you can program it, but to be well educated is not the results of a technical education. That's the results of a liberal education. A liberal education is not what you've learned about those things, but what you've learned about, say, society. A liberal education is not knowing how something works, but knowing how you tick. A liberal education, in contrast to a technical education, is not knowing which country Clinton has most recently sent troops into, but is understanding the actions that have caused nations to rise or civilizations to fall in the last, say, 2,500 years. Nietzsche commented once that the newspaper has replaced prayer on a daily level. And Alan Bloom went one step further and says that TV has replaced even the newspaper. How can we possibly keep a perspective, a distinctness within ourselves when the homogenizing TV invades our houses hours and hours and hours each day? Advancing through the grades of school, or getting a degree of bachelor's or master's or PhD, we confuse those things with what it means to be well educated. Is the only way that a 14-year-old, for example, can become well educated is to cram that 14-year-old along with scores of other 14-year-olds into some government-run school where whole bunches of them are in the classroom and they're presided over by a government-credentialed, specially trained individual, most of whom I would suspect would be hard put to explain the salient features of the distinctiveness of Western civilization. Reichman, in his book, Separating School and State, makes a striking point. He writes that literacy rates were much higher, far higher, in years before compulsory government schooling was in place than after. When government moved in, literacy rates dropped. When Lincoln was a kid, do you think he studied global warming or how to put a condom on a cucumber? He taught himself, and what he read was the Bible, Shakespeare, Euclid. In the offerings of virtually every philosophy department in every college are one or more courses in logic. Logic. Arguments that are deemed to be correct by their form. Or syllogisms. Which syllogisms are valid? The most classic syllogism is the one that goes with a major premise: all men are mortal. That means they all die. Minor premise: Socrates is a man. Conclusion: Socrates is mortal. And that conclusion necessarily follows from the given premises. But not all kinds of syllogisms are valid. Consider the following fun one. Major premise. All libertarians are mortal. Minor premise. Clinton is mortal. Conclusion. Clinton is a libertarian? No, somehow that syllogism just doesn't seem to ring true. But ringing true is a pretty flimsy way to determine the validity of an argument, especially if you get an argument that has 5 or 6 premises and a conclusion. The person who is not trained in logical reasoning may generally say, oh, the argument is valid if they agree with the conclusion. A well-educated person will say that an argument is valid if they agree with its reasoning, regardless of whether they agree with the conclusion. Of course, you can have some really bad reasoning running around and come with that bad reasoning to some really nutty conclusions. In Congress, let's play Congress here. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker of the House, fellow Democrats and Republicans, I wish to propose a bill which states that all cats, like pussycats, you know, all cats have 9 tails. And here is the bill. Whereas, number 1, no cat has 8 tails. Everybody knows that. No cat has 8 tails. And whereas, number 2, a cat has 1 more tail than no cat. Everybody knows that. Therefore, be it resolved that a cat has 9 tails. An essential part of philosophy, the study of logic. Don't you wish that everybody studied it? Science. It covers a great many fields, one of which is energy production. And energy production is big business in these United States. We need our electricity. Part of being well educated is to be able to assess the relative dangers of the different methods of energy production. Oh, for example, would you rather live near a coal-fired power plant or a nuclear-powered plant? I bet I know what you're about to think, or what you're thinking you're going to be saying. You're thinking, I'm going to say, oh, coal. When you burn coal, you get all that CO2 gas and all the smoke. No, try it differently. Let's talk about radiation between coal-fired power plants and nuclear power plants. Now here's something that maybe the Hug-a-Tree Sierra Clubbers or the Save the Earthers have forgotten to mention. You dig up coal out of the ground and you burn it. There are naturally occurring radioactive elements and compounds that are in coal. When they were in the ground, you and I were shielded from those compounds, those radioactive compounds, by the rock and the earth that covered the coal. You dig up the coal and you burn it, and those radioactive particles are thrown into the atmosphere for us to breathe, and we're no longer shielded. Well, how much radiation are we talking about? Alice Gabbard writes in the Oak Ridge Regional Laboratory Review, November 1993, And that was reviewed by Science News, which more people know about, October 1994. And it was estimated that in 1992, the coal-fired power plants threw into the atmosphere 800 tons of uranium that year and 2,000 tons of thorium. That's a lot of radioactive stuff. He states that the radiation exposure in the United States from coal plants is 100 times that from nuclear plants. I wonder if Jane Fonda ever discussed this fact with Albert Gore. Oh, what now, Opus? What, can't you just sit and sleep just like a regular penguin or something? Tell me. You're hungry. You're always hungry. Well, why don't you go out to the fridge and get some, we got some roast turkey out there. How does that sound? Roast turkey. Oh, I know you're too short. Oh, yeah, I'll help you with the handle on the fridge. What? You can't eat roast turkey? Why not? Why can't you eat roast turkey? Oh, you were listening to Madam New Age Crystal Cosmic? And she told you that turkey has got a carcinogen in it. That it's got malinaldehyde. Well, as far as Madam New Age Crystal was talking about it, she's right. Turkey does have a carcinogen. Well, why don't you, you got, what is this here underneath? You got your carrots here, huh? Well, why don't you have, you always are hot for carrots because they're all vegetarian and everything. Why don't you eat a carrot? Well, I'll tell you why, Opus. Because there's at least 4 carcinogens in regular carrots. There's keratoxidin, there's myristicin, there's isoflavones, and there's nitrates. You can forget the carrots. Because it's all a scare story. Did you know that? The American Council on Science and Health, they looked at the malinaldehyde that you were talking about in roast turkey. Sure, it's a carcinogen. And they did the studies. What Madam New Age Crystal didn't tell you is that in order to have it be toxic, you'd have to eat 3.8 tons of it, of turkey, in a single sitting. She forgot to mention that. Dr. Edward Reimers, he's the vice president of that organization. And he said that Americans have got to stop believing that man is evil and that nature is benevolent. Now, try the coffee beans. Coffee beans have a natural pesticide in them. In fact, that natural pesticide is also carcinogenic. It can cause cancer. You know, if a bug eats a coffee bean, he drops over dead. But for you and me, we can tolerate small amounts of pesticides, natural or otherwise. We have to worry, according to the National Council on Science and Health, if we drink 100 cups a day or more. Then you got to start worrying. Our dietary intake, you and me, Americans, has at least, according to that council, at least 10,000 times more natural toxins than our man-made pesticides. The natural stuff is right there in lots. You remember the Alar Square when you were saying, I won't eat no apples and the rest? Ha! They've done the studies. You know, you have the peanut butter in a peanut butter sandwich has at least, according to the lab tests, at least 4 times as much of the toxins than drinking Alar-tainted apple juice. At least 4 times. So you go off, I'll get you your roast beef in a minute. Many years ago, I wrote a poem in English, and that poem had a title. Sometimes it's untitled, but it had a real title, and I entitled it Red Hair, and it was by myself I wrote it. And when I officially, in English, using usage correctly, put it on paper, around the title, I put quotes, because I know how to do it right. Yeah! Quotation marks around the title of my little 8-line poem. Beautiful poem. That's the correct thing to do. But a while ago, when I was beginning to read Milton's great poem, Paradise Lost, and I write that down, there's underlines. Paradise Lost has underlines under it, which is the best place to put underlines, is under it. Wait a minute. Do you see the difference? My poem, Red Hair, had quotes, and Milton's Paradise Lost had an underline. Why? Why? They're both poems. They're both poems. Is it because Uncle Milt is dead and I'm alive? Nope. Can you guess why mine has quotes and Uncle Milt has underlines? Is it because he's more famous than I am? He is. But that's not the reason. That's not the reason. Are you ready for the answer? Here's the answer. Short poems, like Red Hair, go in quotes. And long poems, like Milton's Paradise Lost, are underlined. Do you know that? Oh, don't you send in an email to me saying, what do you do with medium-sized poems? Because I don't know. The world's bestseller, more editions than any other book on the planet, the Bible. Chances are you probably have a copy in your home. Forbes magazine talked about the following Bible quiz. Ready? Who was Noah's wife? Joan of Arc. What is the first commandment? That's when Eve told Adam to eat the apple. These were the children's answers. But the Bible is basically not a kid's book. The sexual intrigue, the mutilations, hangings, give it at least an R rating. But beyond its superficial resemblance to modern movies, it is, as John Quincy Adams wrote, an invaluable and inexhaustible mine of knowledge and virtue. But like Nevada mining, the ore in the Bible is rich in some spots and mighty thin in others. It's pretty well known when you get into the first chapter of Matthew, with all of the begats that are there. About a little over half of the first chapter of Matthew talks about the ancestry of Jesus, from Abraham down through David, down to Jesus. But you ain't seen nothing. Take a look in the Old Testament, in 1 Chronicles, back in the Old Testament, in chapter 1, and that chapter is longer than Matthew, and that whole chapter, chapter 1 of Chronicles, 1 Chronicles, is all begats and son of and son of and son of. But it doesn't stop in the first chapter. The second chapter of 1 Chronicles is all was the father of, was the father of, was the father of, was the father of. And, and the third chapter is more, begat, 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 is the father of, is the ancestor. Would you believe the fourth chapter is more begats and begats? And the fifth chapter of First Chronicles is more ancestry, listing and listing. And the sixth chapter is more and more listing. The sons of Levi, Gershon, Korath, and Merith. The sons of Korath, Abraham, Israel, Hebron, and Uzziel. The children of Amram were Aaron, Moses, and Miriam. The sons of Aaron. And then they go on and on in the sixth chapter of First Chronicles. And the seventh chapter is more ancestry listings. And the eighth chapter is more listings. And the ninth chapter is more listings. You ever got insomnia? First Chronicles, the first 9 chapters are real. They can cure your insomnia. But as Lewis Cassels points out, not every chapter in Holy Scripture is a special delivery letter telling you how to cope with your immediate problems. Like a good novel, most of the points are made indirectly. God dealing with all sorts of people in a variety of situations. And from that, we begin to form a picture of God, of the nature of this universe, and of who we really are. What a century this has been for art. What a horrible century. It may get worse in the next 50 or 100 years, but I have trouble seeing how. Blanchard, in his book, The Uses of a Liberal Education, traces this descent in this last century or so of art into madness. From Aristotle, who lived centuries before Christ, till about 100 years ago, till about this current century, give or take, there was a theory of art, a rationale behind art, of what it was to be great art. In a nutshell, we'd say that great art was art in which there was representation that had meaning beyond itself. True in paintings, music, art, of sculpture, all forms. Representation that had meaning beyond itself. Now that's really not very restrictive. You can paint in oils or in watercolors and still have representation that has meaning beyond itself. You can photograph, you can sculpt, you can make things look realistic, as in this painting by John Singer Sargent, or you can make things look more dreamlike, as in this painting by Rubens entitled Feast of Venus. But it is to be representation that has meaning beyond itself. And this century has been a disaster, as we have witnessed meaning gradually be shoved off the table. Meaning, step by step, has become irrelevant. All right, in a minute's time or so, let me give you a history of art in this century. Things left out, but an overview of what's there. First, there were the Impressionists. Monet. He painted a picture entitled Impression, Sunrise. Impression, Sunrise. 1872. A little over 100 years ago. And from this title of this picture, Impression Sunrise, came the title of the movement, Impressionism. The details are smeared. Monet's water lilies, details are smeared. A dreamlike thing more. And then the post-impressionists, Cézanne, using geometric patches of color. Here's a mountain, and here's a woman. But hey, I can still recognize something in the post-impressionists. After the post-impressionists came the cubists. Picasso's Le Demoiselle d'Avignon. I don't know how to say it exactly. It's also known as the Avignon Brothel, 1907. It's been called the first Cubist painting. It's also one of the most influential paintings of this century. Be it good or bad, it was influential. What's here is shapes and relations of the shapes to each other. But subject was giving way to form. Or let's look at Picasso's Mother and Child. But then came the age of non-objective painting. Who needs subject matter at all? People disappear. Things disappear. What's left? Who knows? Who knows? The random snapshot taken out the window of a car without even looking, or the glob of paint. Here is Joan Mitchell's The Goodbye Door. Great art. Meaning beyond itself? I don't think so. Not that is apparent that they're trying to say something to me. Blanchard reports that Dr. Alva Heinrich of the Psychological Institute of Vienna University did something that many of us in our fantasies would have loved to have done. She set up an exhibition, 30 paintings. 15 of those paintings were done by critically acclaimed modern artists, ones that the critics were wild about. This artist has real genius. This is depth, and all that stuff. And the other 15 paintings were done by schizophrenics, patients in a mental hospital, mentally ill. So she took these 15 great, in quotation marks, artists and 15 paintings by schizophrenics, so bad that they were hospitalized, shuffled them up and put them on the walls, and then invited people in to look at all 30 with the challenge of determining which were great art and which were art by mentally ill people. 158 people she had come through. So it wasn't just 10 or 12 or 15 people. 158 people, and they guessed. And about half of their guesses, half of their guesses were wrong. You couldn't tell. Vanishing in this century, in the world of art, is representation that has meaning beyond itself.